Hey, welcome back. So happy to see you again. Today we'll talk about feedback. I got 3 points here for you, and I'm very excited about feedback as a topic in general. I think it doesn't get as much attention as it deserves because we give it all the time. So um, that's the first point. Like, we are always giving feedback, no matter whether we do it consciously or whether we do it unconsciously. I had a really, really fun day yesterday with a friend who is very observant in terms of body language. And he read my signs incredibly well, whatever was going on. And that reminded me of the fact that even when we think we're not giving feedback because we're not saying anything, we are giving feedback by the facial expression that we have or by the body language that we have. And that doesn't have to be a very much in your face cue. And yes, it's easier for people who read body language well. Yet, even if we're not that attuned to the body language, we will have that subtle feeling in our body of what's going on the other side. So we will notice whether we feel judged or whether there is appreciation or whether there is openness or whether there is closedness. So on that level, we give feedback all the time. And here we come back to, like, what is it that I want to express in a given moment? Like, what is the energy that I want to show up with? Because that feedback will come across either way in every interaction that I choose to have during a day. So what is the energy that you bring to the table? You're always giving feedback. The energetic state that you are in can be felt by the people around you. You know that when you show up with a good mood somewhere, everybody starts being a little more happy. And you notice that when you show up with a disastrous mood, that it tends to pull down people around you a little bit as well, unless they have really well developed and established personal boundaries so they don't take on your energy. Not all of us have that practice. It's another practice I definitely recommend, energetic boundaries, but we'll talk about that some other time. Today it's about feedback. So, first point, whether you think you're doing it or not, you are always giving feedback, consciously or unconsciously. And I'd rather be conscious in my interactions with other people, so I'm trying to be aware of what signals I'm sending. Sweet. Second point, it's about being in the arena. We don't have to accept feedback from everybody. And we don't have to phrase feedback. Like, I very well remember that I just said it's impossible to not give feedback. And we are often choosing to give feedback maybe in a place where we are not showing up 100% ourselves. And that doesn't mean we don't ever get to say anything. But the showing up in the arena, which, by the way, is a term that I have from Brené Brown. She's a fabulous researcher in terms of vulnerability, courage, leadership, and she says that she only wants feedback from people who fully show up in the arena themselves. Like, if we are not all in when it comes to our own way of doing something, then maybe it's not on us to criticize somebody else for not showing up in a particular way. So I try to remind myself of that every time I issue a critique, no matter how constructive it is. I wonder for a moment, okay, is this about the other person or is this in part about me? Am I projecting something onto them, or am I seeing a fault that I perceive in whatever behavior because it's something that I'm not happy with that I'm doing myself? This is a little abstract, so let me find an example. Super simple one. If I meet with a friend and that friend is late and that annoys me, which may or may not happen, but if on a given day that annoys me, then I get to question, Does that annoy me because I get annoyed when I'm late myself, or am I really annoyed that I'm standing here waiting for that other person? And a lot of the time, I will find for myself, and you can check whether that's true for you, that I find things that I don't like when other people do them are the ones that I most dislike when I do them myself. And so it's a really interesting reflection mechanism. Other people are the mirrors in our lives that show us the places where we haven't fully healed or where we are not fully showing up. Whew, that's a tough one to digest. Yeah. Okay, so feedback. Second point, feedback is all about showing up the arena. Showing up in the arena. And it may often be about something that we're not satisfied with how we show up in that particular way. And then we can still say something about it, and maybe phrase it in the right way. Saying, like, I'm not perfect in this, and I noticed, or this is something I'm still practicing myself, and, or like whichever way you find appropriate here. Just show up fully for it. Point number 3, last one, is connected to that second point in the way that we have to observe what's going on inside of us. Sometimes when we give feedback, it's not so much about the thing. And this is especially true when it comes to relationship matters, whether that is in the relationship with a friend, with a family member, or with a colleague, any type of relationship. So if there is a behavior that we disagree with, then a lot of the time it's not so much about the behavior as it is about an underlying need of ours that is not being met. And here is where I like to go back to the work of Marshall B. Rosenberg, who wrote a fabulous book about nonviolent communication. And nonviolent in this sense doesn't only mean that I'm not going to start yelling at people, but it talks about the way how we frame a conversation. So have the conversation be something that is collaborative instead of confrontational, because confrontational, that means the barriers are going to go up on the other side and somebody is not as receptive to what I have to say. If the conversation is collaborative, then we can listen for an emerging outcome. Listen for an emerging outcome. That refers to Otto Scharmer's work at MIT about the 4 levels of listening. So on a first level, we would just be listening to facts in a conversation. On a second level, we would be waiting for them to make a certain point, and then respond to that and not so much pay attention to the rest of it. On the third level, we would be having genuine empathy with the person on the other side and trying to put us into their shoes. And on the fourth level, this is where the magic really happens. This is where we can speak about an emerging future where we are curious where this conversation is going to lead us together. So, sorry, little sidetrack. Look up Otto Scharmer. That work is really interesting as well. But back to the point about Marshall B. Rosenberg's work and an underlying need that maybe didn't get satisfied. So when I come home and my teenage son has socks distributed all over the living room floor, and I start complaining about that, then that son is probably going to go in defensive mode. And the conversation is not going to end where I would like it to go. If instead I can take a deep breath and say to that teenager, hey, I noticed there are a few pairs of socks laying in the living room and in your room, and I have a desire for a nice and tidy space that helps me feel at peace when I come home. Would you be willing to put those socks in the laundry? And so I did 4 things here. The first one is I state a fact. Well, there are socks on the floor in several places. Second one, what is the impact that that has on me? Oh, I don't feel comfortable. Third is I state my need of, to me, it's important to have a tidy environment so I can feel good at home. And the fourth one is then to make a very specific request that the person can fulfill right then and there. And making that request in a kind way. And I have seen this pattern work wonders. And it works with all ages. So I've worked with it from a 5-year-old up all the way to well into retirement age. And I remind myself very frequently that when I can explain why I'm asking for something or why a certain behavior that I don't like, why I don't like it, and what impact that has on me and what need I have, then that conversation goes a lot deeper. So we reveal things about ourselves, we become vulnerable. And I know this is a silly little example and it's from the book, and it's not about this example, and on some days I couldn't be bothered less about socks on the floor or whatever. But we all know that these little everyday things, they happen. And yes, when you look back at it later, you think, oh man, it's just really not so big deal. Like, why did I get triggered? Why did I get triggered? And then you get to go become curious about your own needs and why that is actually a triggering thing. So I want to invite you to become curious every time somebody else does something that you dislike. Like, why does that trigger me? Is it mirroring something that I might be doing and I don't like it? What need do I have that is not being met in that moment? And what would it take to meet that need instead? And then find the courage to communicate that need and what it implies. Whew, big one. So 3 points today. They're pretty well connected, and yet it's easier to digest them if we take them in these 3 steps. First of all, we're always giving feedback, whether we want it or not: facial expression, tone of voice, body language, and verbally. Second, stay in the arena, be in the arena. When we give feedback, we want to be aware of how this is maybe just mirroring something that is going on inside of us, and check whether we are fully showing up in that area in our life. And the third one, when I detect a behavior that I want to say something about because I dislike it, like, what is my underlying need there? Become really curious about those needs, and then have the courage and the vulnerability to express those and to share how you work on the inside, and you will get a much deeper connection out of it. That way, feedback can be something that takes a relationship to a much deeper level. And again, this applies to any type of relationship in our lives. The moment we can open up, and I've said this in another video, the Brené Brown quote of soft front, strong back, wild heart. Find that courage, be vulnerable, and stand up for what you truly believe in. And continue to bring out all that love, all that life force energy within you. Share it, spread it widely. Have a beautiful day. I'm sending you much love, and I hope I get to see you soon.